So how did the United States Air Force take out half of North Vietnam's Mig-21s in only 12 minutes? Stick around and I'll show you. Today we are talking about Operation Bolo, one of the most successful combat operations of the Vietnam War. It solidified the legacy of Robin Olds as a bold and courageous leader, and it showcased the skill of the U.S. Air Force's 8th Tactical Fighter Wing, known as the Wolfpack. The tactics and execution of Operation Bolo are still discussed to this day, and it's not likely that it ever would have happened if not for the commander of the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing, Colonel Robin Olds. He has been described as a bold and courageous leader who wasn't afraid to ruffle some feathers in order to ensure the safety of his men and the success of the mission. Heck, all you have to do is look at him to know he's a rule breaker. In 1965, as a gesture of defiance against strict military leadership, he grew an extravagantly waxed and non-regulation mustache. A small gesture of defiance for sure, but it became a symbol for the men of the 8th Fighter Wing, and it endeared him to the airmen he led. The son of a World War II pursuit pilot, Olds attended West Point, and within months of graduation, he had become an ace by shooting down 5 enemy fighters in his P-38. He would soon be promoted to major, be given a command, transition to the P-51 Mustang, and kill some more Germans. He would finish the war with 12 total kills. Now fast forward to the Vietnam War. Olds, now a colonel, took command of the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing stationed at Ubon Royal Thai Air Force Base. Under his leadership, they would become the top MiG-killing wing in all of Southeast Asia. A sign over his door read, "Peace is not our profession." Now before we get into Operation Bolo, it's important to know what was going on in the skies over Vietnam that made it necessary in the first place. On 2 March 1965, the United States and the South Vietnamese kicked off Rolling Thunder. Its objective was to boost morale, persuade North Vietnam to cease its support for the communist insurgency in South Vietnam without deploying U.S. ground forces, destroy the North Vietnamese transportation system, industrial base, and air defenses, and halt the flow of men and material into South Vietnam. One of the primary aircraft used during the operation was the F-105 Thunder Chief fighter bomber. In fact, THUDs conducted the majority of the strike bombing missions during the early years of the Vietnam War. It also had an ominous distinction. It suffered such high losses that it became the only American aircraft to be removed from combat. By late 1966, the North Vietnamese Air Force's MiG-21 fighters had become deadly effective at intercepting and downing the slower F-105 Thunder Chiefs that had been conducting bombing missions over North Vietnam. The MiGs would simply evade the F-4 Phantom escorts and strike the more vulnerable F-105s, inflicting significant losses. And the MiGs didn't even have to shoot down the F-105s in order to be successful. When the 105 pilots spotted the 21s, they would jettison their bombs in order to make them more maneuverable. This effectively meant that the mission was a failure since they weren't able to drop their bombs on the intended target. It also meant that they would have to repeat the mission. This necessitated a bold countermeasure to neutralize the MiG threat and regain air superiority. That bold countermeasure? Robin Olds and the men of the Wolfpack. Colonel Olds realized that the formations consisting of the F-105s and F-4s used the same approaches time and time again. They had become predictable, and predictability in war is bad, real bad. He also realized that the North Vietnamese became experts at distinguishing the THUDs from the Phantoms based on their radio frequencies and call signs. So the MiG pilots who had no interest in taking on the F-4s, they simply avoided them in favor of the F-105s, which they were more than happy to engage. Colonel J.B. Stone, a pilot with the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing, along with Colonel Olds, came up with a bold plan to trick the MiG pilots and ground trackers into thinking that a formation of F-4 Phantoms that were loaded with AIM-7 Sparrow, radar-guided air-to-air missiles, and AIM-9 Sidewinder heat-seeking air-to-air missiles were really the more vulnerable F-105s. The strategy called for the Phantoms to mimic the flight profiles, formations, radio calls, and electronic signatures of the F-105 strike packages in order to deceive the North Vietnamese air defenses. It utilized QRC-160 jamming pods, normally carried by the F-105s, to replicate their electronic signature. Now, the North Vietnamese pilots aren't going to want to stick around once they realize that what they thought were Thunder Chiefs was really Phantoms. They were going to turn around and hightail it out of there to safe airspace. And of course, the Americans knew this, and they had a plan to counter it. Phantoms were positioned to block the MiG escape routes and prevent them from landing or fleeing to the friendly confines of China. And in addition to F-4s, support aircraft such as the EB-66 jamming planes, F-104 escorts, and EC-122 radar surveillance planes were used during the operation to support the main strike group. And the plan was presented to General William Moymer, the 7th Air Force commander, and approved on 22 December 1966. And the operation was codenamed Bolo, the cane-cutting machete that also doubled as a Filipino martial arts weapon. The Bolo does not appear to be a weapon until the opponent gets too close to evade an attack. And that was the main strategy used during Operation Bolo. Deceive the enemy MiGs into attacking what they thought was a vulnerable formation of Thunder Chiefs, only to surprise and kill them with the superior Phantoms. Operation Bolo kicked off on 2 January 1967. And when Colonel Olds presented the plan to his men, he told them that they would be like wolves in sheep's clothing. He closed the briefing by stating, quote, "All right, you Wolfpack, let's get them." The name would stick. The airmen of the Wolfpack were given call signs that were taken from popular American cars of the day: Ford, Rambler, and of course Olds, which was short for Oldsmobile, and just happened to be the last name of the unit's CO. The mission was a phenomenal success and has been recognized as the most successful aerial battle of the war. The airmen of the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing caught the enemy completely by surprise. And I'm sure there were probably a few soiled drawers when the North Vietnamese pilots spotted those Phantoms. And during a 12-minute engagement on the first day of Operation Bolo, the men of Wolfpack shot down 7 MiG-21s with 2 more probable kills. They suffered no losses of their own. Now, 7 MiG kills might not seem like a lot, but it represented approximately half of the operational force. 2 follow-up missions on January 5th and 6th resulted in 2 more MiG kills. Again, no losses were suffered by the Americans. And Colonel Olds described it this way, quote, "Deliberately planned fighter sweep went just as we hoped. The MiGs came up, the MiGs were aggressive, we tangled, they lost." The overwhelming success of the operation severely degraded the North Vietnamese MiG force, which was grounded for several months because they feared losing all of their aircraft. And as well they should have. They took the time off to teach their pilots new tactics and to regroup. And during a USO tour after the operation, Bob Hope said of the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing that they were the greatest distributor of MiG parts in all the world. And Robin Olds and his Wolfpack exemplified daring leadership, tactical innovation, and the relentless pursuit of air superiority during Vietnam. And their achievements highlighted the capabilities of the F-4 Phantom and the importance of an aggressive mindset in aerial warfare, leaving an indelible mark on U.S. Air Force culture and tactics. Colonel Olds was a skilled fighter pilot and an effective leader, and his 3 decades of distinguished service is held in high regard among his peers and historians to this day. And what makes Colonel Olds such an effective leader is that he led from the front and wasn't afraid to break a few rules in order to accomplish the mission and to take care of his men. And his methods weren't so different from another great military leader, General Theodore Roosevelt Jr. He actually landed at the age of 56 on Omaha Beach during the first wave on D-Day. Talk about leading from the front. To hear his amazing story, click the screen now. And until next time, I'm Dennis Gill for Revealing History. Hey Chuck, I haven't forgot about you.
Buck melanoma, Molly Russell's wart.